Welcome to The Explainer. You know, sometimes the most shocking predictions about our world don't come from futurists, but from the deep past. Today, we're diving into an absolutely wild story about a forgotten voice from the 1700s who might have seen our modern world more clearly than we do.
So let me just ask you this straight up. Could a radical cleric, writing almost 250 years ago, have actually predicted some of the biggest family crises we're facing right now? I know, it sounds impossible. But what if I told you his warning about a new marriage law looks eerily like the data we see all around us today?
Yeah, this story is a wild ride.
So, let's meet the man at the center of all this. His name was Martin Madan. He was an English cleric, and in 1780 he dropped a bombshell of a book called the Philothora. It was so scandalous because he actually argued for, get this, polygamy. But here's the thing, his crazy solution was really just his desperate answer to a problem he saw getting totally out of control.
Madan was completely fixated on this idea he called female ruin. And back then, this wasn't just about a broken heart. For a woman to be seduced, maybe have a child, and then be abandoned by the man, well, that was it. It meant total social and economic collapse. She was basically left with nothing. No money, no support, no future. That was the catastrophe he was trying to prevent.
So what did he think was causing all this ruin? Madan pointed his finger directly at one law, the Marriage Act of 1753. See, before that, a simple promise and, well, consummation could be seen as a real marriage. But this new law said, nope, you need a formal ceremony in a church. And Madan's big radical prediction was this. Once you make marriage just a piece of paper, you give irresponsible men the perfect loophole to just walk away saying, hey, we never had the ceremony, so I don't know you a thing.
Okay, it is so easy to get hung up on the whole polygamy thing. I mean, that's why everyone thought he was nuts back then. But for this explainer, we're going to put his wild solution to the side for a minute. Let's focus on his diagnosis of the problem. What was the core logic behind his fear? His argument really breaks down into 4 simple steps, like a chain reaction. First, he believed that a man's actions, actually creating a child with a woman, that's what creates the real moral duty, not some legal document. Second, because of that, formal laws can actually hurt women by giving bad actors an easy way out. Third, this ruin he talked about wasn't just bad luck. It was a direct result of men dodging that responsibility. And all of that leads to his biggest point. For a society to be stable, fathers have to be held accountable. Period.
So, that was his theory, all the way back in 1780. But was he right? Did any of his dire predictions actually happen? Okay, let's fast forward 250 years and look at the hard data. The results are pretty staggering.
Let's start right in Madan's backyard, England and Wales. In 2021, for the very first time in history, the majority of babies, over half, were born outside of a formal, legal marriage. Just let that sink in. This is a massive social shift, and it's exactly the kind of thing Madan was worried about. Unions happening without the official commitment.
And look, this isn't just a British thing. Not at all. This trend is everywhere. In France, it's over 60%. Here in the United States, it's over 40%. The very thing Madan feared in his own country has become a standard feature across the entire Western world.
But what does this actually mean for people? Well, the data shows some serious consequences. In the UK, almost half of all kids will live in a single-parent home at some point, and those kids are twice as likely to grow up in poverty. Now, doesn't that sound a lot like Magun's ruin? And in the US, the picture is just as stark. More than 18 million kids are living without their biological father, which we know is linked to all sorts of challenges later in life.
And this isn't some fringe idea, by the way. Mainstream sociologists, like David Papineau, have built their careers studying this. His work flat out confirms what Madan worried about, that the absence of fathers has a real, measurable, and often negative effect on kids and on society.
So this all leads to a giant question. If, in millions and millions of cases, individual fathers aren't playing that traditional provider role anymore, then who is? How did our society adjust to this new reality?
And this is where we see the really fundamental change. Madan's world was built on what you could call the personal provider model. The individual man was responsible. He was on the hook.
Our world has created something totally different, the surrogate provider. When a father is gone, the responsibility and the massive financial cost is picked up by the state through things like welfare, housing benefits, and all sorts of other social programs.
You can see right here how our modern world directly clashes with his. Madan thought an informal union created a binding moral duty. Our laws today, they mostly disagree. He argued a man's duty exists whether there's a certificate or not. Today, that duty often isn't enforced unless there's a formal legal claim. His whole goal was protecting women and children from ruin. Our legal system today is much more focused on individual rights and secular rules.
So all of this leads us to a conclusion that's both totally fascinating and honestly pretty challenging. It turns out we're still wrestling with the exact same problem that Martin Madan saw brewing all those centuries ago.
And this, right here, is the great irony of Martin Madan. The guy was laughed out, condemned, and totally dismissed for his proposed solution. But his diagnosis? His warning that separating sex from long-term paternal responsibility would lead to massive social problems? Well, that turned out to be shockingly accurate. The very things he was afraid of are now multi-billion-dollar headaches for governments all over the modern world.
And that leaves us with this final, really important question. Madan's answer was a strict religious moral code. Our answer has been secular laws and a government safety net. But if neither of those things has really solved the problem of fractured families and father absence, then what does? What is the secret ingredient, the cultural norm, the personal ethic that actually makes commitment and social responsibility stick?